What's going on, guys? Welcome to another UFC breakdown and predictions video. This time for UFC St. Louis, Derek Lewis versus Rodrigo Nascimento. Now, this week I will be doing something a little different in terms of breakdowns. I'm going to go less on the technical analysis side where I nitpick every little thing that these fighters do right and wrong, and kind of more go with my previous knowledge of watching these guys fight and going more of like a my instinctual decision as opposed to like trying to convince myself on a different side that I'm not confident in because of certain things I saw in their previous fights. Now, in the first few fights I did watch some old tape to try to like break down those fights, but then I decided, I'm like, you know what? Last week it didn't really help me. UFC 301, we did terrible. We had a terrible prediction rate, so I figured let me switch it up. Let me try to go more of like an instinctual picks and prior knowledge as opposed to like technical analysis where I'm breaking down every single thing. So we'll see how that goes. If we end up failing miserably once again, maybe I'm just going to have to figure something else out. But I will try my best not to blabber. I'll try my best to have some sort of reasoning behind my picks. But let's get into it. Now, make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button for more UFC content, and drop comments down below. I want to hear your guys' opinion on specific matchups. Whether you agree or disagree with me, it doesn't matter. I want to hear your guys' perspective and takes on these matchups. So let's kick things off. Starting off the card in St. Louis, we got J.J. Aldrich going up against Veronica Hardy. Now, my pick is going to be Veronica Hardy in this matchup. On the J.J. Aldrich side, she is a very fundamentally sound fighter. She has a methodical approach, doesn't do anything super wild, doesn't put herself in danger often. She's going to stay on the feet, pick her shots, throw her feints, do her thing, mix in the clinches, and mix in wrestling as well. She's not super dangerous. She's only got 3 KO victories over 19 career fights. Now, if you go on the Veronica Hardy side, formerly known as Veronica Macedo, I'm sure you guys have heard that multiple times from different analysts, but she took a break from 2020 to 2023. In that time, she married I always want to say Greg Hardy. Dan Hardy. She married Dan Hardy, who is a former UFC fighter, but a great MMA mind that is going to help her rejuvenate her career. And she's still only 28 years old, so I'm excited to see where she ends up in a few years. But I will be going with her in this matchup. Reason being is I think she's the faster striker. I think she's going to be the better striker. She moves well on the feet. She's in and out quick. She goes bang, bang, bang inside, dips out before she gets in any danger, and then moves laterally. She does everything right, and a big thing that I like is that she trusts her corner and she listens. Now, not that I know this from previous experience, but from what I've heard from different fighters is when you're in there, you're on like survival mode. You're going mostly off of those instincts. So it's hard to find those minute details that your corner is able to see on the outside and not being like involved in the fight. So it's really cool that she trusts her corner and that she listens to them. It allows her to adapt and find more success in her fights. Now for JJ Aldrich, she had a nice solid win in her previous match against Montana De La Rosa. Before that, she went up against Na Liang, and we all know Na Liang. You guys take that win with a grain of salt. Na Liang is a first-rounder bust fighter that had success against Aldrich in that first round. Prior to that, she lost to Lipski and she lost to Erin Blanchfield, which is nothing to be ashamed of in those two fights, especially in that Blanchfield matchup. But I just think that Veronica Hardy is just going to be the better striker. She'll find more success on the feet, and if it does go into the clinching and wrestling exchanges, I don't think she's going to be outgunned. We saw Veronica Hardy in her return to the UFC. She had a fantastic 15-minute fight against Juliana Miller where she destroyed her over those 15 minutes. Not even a close contest, but I don't hold that win too highly because Juliana Miller is not UFC caliber in my opinion, regardless of winning the Ultimate Fighter season 30, I believe. Terrible Ultimate Fighter season, regardless. Got that win. Good for her. She got a dub in her after 3 years being out of the sport. And then more recently, she beat Jamie Lynn Horth over a split decision, which I think was a unanimous decision in the favor of Veronica Hardy. But Jamie Lynn Horth is a big women's flyweight, very physically imposing, and where I thought she was going to be out-muscled in those clinching and wrestling exchanges, Veronica Hardy seemed very strong in that fight. So I don't think like Jamie Lynn Horth didn't really find much success there. Yes, she did garner some control time and was able to take down Hardy, but there was a lot of situations where Hardy would outmuscle her up against the cage in the clinch. She would reverse positions there. She would also have nice reversals on the mat as well to end up in top position for a little bit of time. But on the feet, she was nice and quick, in and out. I think she's going to find success. I think she stands out more on the feet against JJ Aldrich, where she's going to find success, and it'll be more of a contested fight in those clinch and wrestling exchanges. But I think Veronica Hardy takes this on the scorecards by unanimous decision. Let's move on. Next up, we have a welterweight fight. Jared Gooden going up against Kevin Jousset, and my pick will be Jousset for this fight. Reason being is this is Jared Gooden's second stint with the UFC. He's not the most highly skilled, highly talented fighter. He does rely a lot on that power. He moves in, he moves forward, and looks to land that one big strike that'll wobble his opponent or just put him away. If he's going for those takedowns, it's more of like a power-based takedown where he runs through his opponent, picks him up, slams him. And so that's Jared Gooden's game plan. He's all power. He's got that low hand style, that Bobby Green-esque style with his hands low, which helps for like takedown defense. But in terms of like striking defense, he has good head movement, but he's extremely hittable. We know that bobbing and weaving isn't the number one line of defense in fighting. That guard is very important, which Jared Gooden does not do. He keeps his hands low in the fights. Now we have Kevin Jousset on the other side, a second-degree black belt in judo and a BJJ purple belt. But he's with those guys in City Kickboxing, Adesanya, Dan Hooker, Volk, Kai Kara-France, Ulberg. So he's picking up the striking, and he seems, every time he steps into the octagon, he seems like he's more comfortable on the feet. Now, back to the Jared Gooden side. In his second stint in the UFC, he's had 2 fights. In his return, he fought Carlston Harris, where Jared Gooden weighed 177. I don't even think he just decided not to cut weight for that fight. It was ridiculous. Regardless, he was getting pieced up on the feet by a Carlston Harris who is a wrestler. In his most recent fight, he club and subbed Wellington Turman in that second round, but in the first round, he was getting pieced up by a grappler. Jared Gooden is extremely hittable. Kevin Jousset has developed a nice technical kickboxing fighting style. And one thing I like that he does, a couple things I like that he does, he has a heavy leg kick that seemed to be tricky for his opponents. In that Kiefer Crosby fight in his UFC debut, we saw that. Chewed up Kiefer's leg early, ended up submitting him in that end of that first round. Kanan Song, same thing, was able to chew up that leg. He also has like a half Philly shell style. He keeps up a nice high right guard. I don't know how to how to combine those words, but he keeps his left hand down low, and when he jabs, he goes from the waist and goes up. So that's a very deceptive jab. It's hard to see when it's coming, and it garners more power coming up from the waist like that. So I think he's going to find the money there. He does well by dictating the range to avoid that power from Gooden. I think that's going to play well. I think he's going to chew up Gooden's leg, keep him at range with that jab, and then I wouldn't be surprised if he even decides to dodge one of those heavy haymakers coming from Gooden, clinch up, use his judo background to get the fight to the ground, and possibly even try for a submission. Gooden's never been submitted in his career, but I think Jousset is very live to wrestle early, get the power out of Gooden's arms, and then maybe go for a wrestling-based finish, whether it's like a ground and pound TKO or a submission on the ground. I think that's the best route for him. I think he should wrestle early, take that power out of Gooden, and get that finish later on. Now, in terms of Gooden's power, which he usually relies on, I can trust the durability of Jousset. Jousset only has 1 TKO loss in his career, but it was a doctor stoppage loss against Jack Della Maddalena on the regional scene. So his durability checks out. He's going to be the more technical striker on the feet. I think he's just going to be better everywhere than Jared Gooden. The only thing that Jared Gooden has in this fight is the power and strength advantage. But I think Kevin Jousset sails to a victory here. I could see him winning in literally all 3 ways: a submission, a KO, or a decision. I'm going to go out on a whim here and pick Kevin Jousset by submission. Now, next up, we have a flyweight match. We have Charles Johnson going up against Jake Hadley. Now, the prior 2 fights are the ones that I watched a little bit of tape on before I decided to kind of go more instinctual in my breakdowns and my picks. But this fight, I watched a little bit of Jake Hadley's previous fights. I've seen basically all of Charles Johnson's fights in the UFC. but I was really trying to convince myself to pick Jake Hadley in this matchup for some reason. But after sitting on it a little while, I am going to go with the underdog, Charles Johnson. The reason being is Jake Hadley and Charles Johnson seem to struggle against the same kind of opponents. Jake Hadley, in his UFC debut, goes up against Nascimento, who is a fantastic grappler, a great jiu-jitsu specialist, and he ended up losing by unanimous decision. After that, Jake Hadley went up against Carlos Candelario, I believe, where he was on his back and he threw up a triangle choke to get the win. I don't think Charles Johnson's ever going to be in that situation because Charles Johnson does not look to wrestle or play in anybody's guard. He wants to be on the feet. That's what his main goal is in every fight. That's his strategy in every fight. Now after that, Jake Hadley gets a 1-minute TKO over Malcolm Gordon when he lands a fat body shot. So I mean, like, it's a win in the UFC, but it's Malcolm Gordon. I'm not holding that in high regard at all. In Jake Hadley's most recent fight, he goes up against Cody Durden. Heavy wrestling pressure. Cody Durden also has a win over Charles Johnson, but he has no answer for it. Jake Hadley's supposed to have that wrestling and grappling background, but couldn't deal with that heavy pressure from Cody Durden in that wrestling. Now we go over to the Charles Johnson side. He's had more fights in the UFC, but in his short notice UFC debut, he goes up against Muhammad Makayev. Makayev takes him down 12 times. Now, I know that's not a good look, but the reason why Makayev is getting so many takedowns is because Charles Johnson has such a good get-up game. The fact that this guy doesn't quit on himself and he works to get back to his feet, I love that from a fighter. He's never really out of a fight that way. Goes in next up against Zhumagulov, split decision win. Jimmy Flick, ground and pound TKO win. Good for, like, this is the same value I hold with the Hadley win over Gordon. It's Jimmy Flick. Nothing crazy. Next up, Ode Osborne. Split decision. It was kind of a gift for Ode Osborne, that win there. I believe Charles should have won. Regardless, Ode Osborne was able to take him down and, I guess, sway the decision towards him because of that. Cody Durden took him down 11 times. Now, another thing like the Makayev fight. Yes, he's getting taken down 11 times, but it's because he's getting back up to his feet, not giving up on himself. Rafael Estevam, the next fight through. Estevam had more success in terms of wrestling control. Took him down 4 times in that fight, but worked his way back to his feet. Didn't fold under the pressure. Didn't give up on himself. And in that third round, it was borderline 10-8. He was destroying Estevam in that third round, which I love to see. Like I said, he's not giving up on himself. He's all gas. I don't know. His cardio seems to be fantastic, and he's never out of a fight. More recently, as at Maxim, a Kazakhstani prospect that was supposed to just come in and run through Charles Johnson, and it seemed like he was on his way in that first round. I believe he dropped Charles Johnson and got some takedowns in that first round. But like I said, Charles Johnson does not quit on himself. He came back and started piecing up Maxim for the rest of that fight and ended up with a unanimous decision victory. Now, I don't see anything different in this fight. Jake Hadley really has nothing to offer in terms of the striking. I think Johnson is miles ahead on the feet. He's going to have that volume. It's going to be hard for Jake Hadley to keep up in that department. And in terms of wrestling and grappling, Charles Johnson has seen way better wrestlers, way better grapplers in the UFC. And even if Jake Hadley gets some takedowns, I don't think he has the control enough against somebody like Charles Johnson. Johnson's just going to get back up to his feet and start piecing up Hadley once again. And like I said, in terms of submissions on the back or submissions in general, Charles Johnson has fantastic submission defense. Makayev wasn't able to submit him. Cody Durden wasn't able to submit him. So I really like Charles Johnson in his matchup as I sat on it a little more, especially as an underdog. Like I said, I originally went with Hadley, but I'm smartening up a little bit. I'm going with Charles Johnson here. I don't see a finish. Charles Johnson's more of a decision fighter. So give me Charles Johnson. Next up, we have a welterweight fight. Now, this is where I stopped watching tape, and I'm not too familiar with either of these fighters. I've seen them on the Contender Series, and I've seen their UFC debut, but I will be going with another underdog here in Billy Goff. I've heard people break down this fight. I've heard a few people break down this fight this week, and I'm surprised nobody's made the comparison to Billy Goff and Trevor Peek. In terms of grittiness, in terms of tenacity, and that having that dog in him, Billy Goff is like Trevor Peek. He may be a little more technical in terms of like overall MMA ability. Trevor Peek, Mr. Mr. Standing Hammer Fist. Anyway, so I think Billy Goff is going to just outdog Trey Waters in this fight. Trey Waters is a massive human being, especially for this weight class. Massive as in lengthwise. I think he's going to have the striking advantage because of that. But Billy Goff is not afraid to get in the pocket, eat some shots while he gets there, and just throw heavy. I can also see him mixing in the wrestling as well. We've seen that on his Contender Series fight against the Simon, what's his name here so I don't butcher it. It is, one sec, my computer is taking forever to load. Simon Smotritsky. He did get hurt early in that fight, but the fight didn't even last 4 minutes. He got hurt a little bit, mixed in that wrestling as I remember, and then ended up finishing Simon in that first round to get his contract. Now in his UFC debut, he went up against Yusaku Kinoshita, I believe in Singapore. I think it was on the Max Holloway and Korean Zombie fight card, but regardless, another sub 4 minute finish. He was just all pressure. I believe he finished it with a body punch, yes, and then the TKO to Kinoshita on the ground. But regardless, Billy Goff's just an absolute dog. Now we got Trey Waters on the other side. Like I said, very lengthy guy. He's 6'5", 77-inch reach. He's going to have that length advantage. If he can keep distance against Billy Goff, he's going to be able to piece him up. We saw him do that to Josh Quinlan, but Josh Quinlan is nothing without the steroids. Regardless, Dana White's Contender Series, Trey Waters goes up against Gabriel Bonfim, where he gets Von Flue choked in that first round. That was really cool to watch because I think that was the first live Von Flue choke that I've seen. But as we know, if you can weather that storm from Gabriel Bonfim, we've seen it recently, a.k.a. the Bonfim and Nicholas Dalby fight. If you can kind of weather that early round one storm from Bonfim, you can't finish him. He wasn't able to do that. He goes back to the LFA, gets a TKO victory over Jalen Fuller, and then comes back to beat Josh Quinlan by unanimous decision, similar to a way that people think Trey Waters is going to defeat Billy Goff. Stay safe, stay in that range where he's pop shotting, using that length, using his kicks, and will cruise to a unanimous decision victory. But Billy Goff is not going to let that happen. He's going to close the distance. He doesn't care if he gets hit. He does get hurt in his fights as well, but he's an absolute dog. He won't give up on himself, similar to Trevor Peek. So he's going to come in. I think he's going to close the distance, find the chin of Trey Waters. Trey Waters does have like a wider stance, and because he's so long, that leg is there for those takedowns. I think Billy Goff's going to mix in those takedowns as well. And I think he's just going to outwork Trey Waters. I love picking these junkyard dogs that are underdogs as well. The value's there. He's going to fight for your dollar. I think Billy Goff is very live as an underdog in this fight. So let's go ahead. Go with another underdog here. Charles Johnson, now Billy Goff, back-to-back underdogs. I think he gets this done. Next up, we have a strawweight fight. Tabitha Ricci going up against Tecia Torres, but Tecia Pennington now, because she's married to bantamweight champion, women's bantamweight champion Raquel Pennington. And this fight isn't going to be isn't going to really be a breakdown, other than the fact that I don't know what to expect from Tecia in her return. She's been out of the octagon for 2 years, has married Pennington in the meantime, and is now a new mother. So congrats to her, but I don't know where her head's at. Being out of the octagon for 2 years, being a new mother, having that marriage now. I don't know where her priorities are. I know she wants to get back in the octagon, obviously, but she's going up against a Tabitha Ricci, who is a tough fight for a lot of girls in this division, especially ones that haven't been in the octagon for 2 years. Tabitha Ricci's only 2 years old. Wow. Is 29 years old, so I think she's on the up, whereas as opposed to Tecia being on the down slope. Tabitha Ricci typically wants to take her opponents down. She isn't too good on the feet, but she will find a little bit of success in that department. But like I said, this isn't going to be much of a technical breakdown. I know what to expect in this matchup from Tabitha Ricci. She doesn't quit on herself either. She's going to come forward. She's going to keep trying for those takedowns. I think she will find success. I don't know where Ticia's at in her career. She's 34 years old now. I don't know if she has the motivation to continue fighting. We will see. Maybe I get surprised in this matchup, but I will go Tabitha Ricci to win a unanimous decision victory against a returning Tecia Pennington. So you guys take that as you will. Take it with a grain of salt. Not much of a breakdown, but I will be going with Tabitha Ricci. Next up, we got Terrence McKinney going up against Esteban Ribovics. Now, Terrence McKinney obviously is a fan favorite. This guy's got that fan favorite style. He's going to come in, look for the kill early, but if he doesn't get it, he's going to wither away and get finished later on in the fight. He's like a roller coaster. That first 5 minutes is that incline going up to the top, to the peak of the roller coaster. But if he doesn't finish the fight in the first 5 minutes, the rest of the fight is like that first drop in the roller coaster. That's what's gonna happen. This guy has all the skills in the world to become a fantastic fighter and move up in the rankings, but his cardio is just his worst enemy. In this specific matchup, typically he is the more skilled fighter in all of his matchups. He has the power on the feet, he's got good striking, and he has a wrestling base which allows him to take his opponents down, grapple them, and threaten those submissions as well. So overall, he is going to be the better fighter in this matchup, especially in most of his fights as well. Esteban isn't going to be like I said, McKinney's going to be the more skillful fighter here. Esteban has decent hands on the feet, nothing crazy, but he has shown that he struggles in that wrestling department. In his fight on the Contender Series, he went up against Thomas Paul, I believe, who is actually a deaf fighter. So I mean, like, great win. Thomas Paul is actually quite a savage, so I'm not going to be like, oh, it's a deaf fighter. He does fantastic. Watching his fights back, when I was watching tape for that specific fight, I actually picked Thomas Paul to win. But Esteban came in, knocked him out in a minute and a half. Great win for him. He comes in, fights Loic Ruziboev in his UFC debut, but he ends up losing a unanimous decision because he can't fight off those takedowns. One thing I will say, though, is he's another fighter that doesn't quit on himself, and he has enough ability to stay safe in those wrestling exchanges, but he's shown in his UFC tenure so far that he can't really defend them that well. In the fight after that, Camuela Kirk, same thing. Camuela was able to take him down and take his back in multiple occasions in that fight, but Esteban Ribovics never quit on himself. He has decent enough defense not to get submitted. And this fight really comes down to which side you think will be successful in their game plan. If you think that Terrence McKinney is going to come out here and just absolutely steamroll Esteban, finish him in that first round, then you obviously take McKinney. But if you think Ribovics is good enough to weather that storm, get out of that first 5 minutes, and then come back in the last 2 rounds and probably finish Terrence McKinney, then you go with Esteban Ribovics. But this is more of a live betting opportunity. Obviously, Terrence McKinney is going to come out strong in that first round, and at underdog money, that's not a bad idea. Go with a Terrence McKinney play. If he wins in that first round, fantastic. You win your bet. If you go with Esteban Ribovics after that first round onslaught from McKinney, you're going to get a way better price on Ribovics, and then you can kind of like hedge your bet that way. I truly believe that Esteban is going to be good enough to weather that storm. He doesn't quit on himself. He seems like a tough kid. So I will be picking Ribovics in this matchup. I just can't go with a fighter that solely relies on that first 5 minutes to win his fights. You see him if we go back on Terrence McKinney's fights, if you're dating back to 2021, he has a 7-second win over Matt Frevola that aged well. Frevola's he's a tough opponent in this division, so 7-second win, fantastic. First round rear naked choke against Fares ZM. That's another solid win. But against Drew Dober, gets finished in 3 minutes in that fight. Is putting an absolute beating on Drew Dober. But we know Drew Dober's a crimson chin. This guy has a chin made of granite. He weathered that storm, took everything McKinney had and ate it, and then ended up putting him away. Next fight, Eric Gonzalez, standing rear naked choke. Good win there. Bonfim comes in his UFC debut, weathers that first round. He got Bonfim's back for 4 minutes in that first round. Wasn't able to finish him. Came back in the second. Started gassing out. Ishmael Bonfim, flying knee KO. Emphatic. That was like a knockout of the year candidate, I believe. Same thing. Goes up against Nazim Sadikov. Fantastic first round, like he always does. But he didn't finish. 1 minute into that second round, gets rear naked choked. And then he's strung together 2-fight win streak, but against Mike Breeden? against Brendan Moreau, those fights were handpicked for him to finish to get his height back because he's a promotable, exciting fighter. I just don't think he's going to be able to put Esteban away as quickly as he has his most recent opponents. I think he's going to weather that storm and lose in typical Terrence McKinney fashion in the late in that first or in that second round. So give me Esteban Ribovics in this fight. Next up, we got Chase Hooper and Vyacheslav Borshchev, Slava Claus going at it in the lightweight division. Now, this is going to be another fight that you go with the side that you think will be able to implement their game plan better. Chase Hooper, as we know, a young guy, slowly filling out his frame, but he is a grappler. The kid has fantastic jiu-jitsu, and we've seen that in multiple of his UFC fights. More recently against Jordan Levitt, who is a great grappler in his own right. Paddy Pimblett wasn't able to get Jordan Levitt out of there until the second round. Chase Hooper comes in, chokes him out in 3 minutes. Fantastic. Nick Fiore fight. Nick Fiore's nothing special. He gets a unanimous decision win, which is good because before that, Steve Garcia put him away in brutal fashion on the feet in a minute and a half, which is not a good look. And then prior to that, now we're getting into May 2022, a couple years ago. He is a different fighter since then. But then you go to Vyacheslav Borshchev. We talked about Borshchev a little bit during the UFC Vegas 91 breakdowns when we were talking about Mahashate. This is a former Russian and world kickboxing champion. There is not a lot of fighters that will be able to stand on the feet with Borshchev. This guy's coming off of a draw against Nazim Sadikov in one of the craziest fights that I've watched. There's a lot of them up there, but that was a nice back and forth win where we thought Sadikov could get a finish in that fight. We thought Borshchev could get a finish in that fight. That ended up being a majority draw, and I agree with that decision. That fight was very exciting to watch. Before that, he knocked out Mahashate in the second round. Fantastic fight for him there. Now before that, Mike Davis. We just saw what Mike Davis was able to do to Natan Levy. The guy's a monster when he goes in there and implements his wrestling game plan. Before that, Mark Diakese, same thing. A high-pressure wrestler that's going to take advantage of a kickboxer that doesn't have good takedown defense. So, and then you remember that he fought Chris Duncan on the Contender Series. Knocked Chris Duncan out, which is a fantastic win now considering how good Duncan's been doing. But like I said, this is just going to come down to who you think will be able to implement their game plan. If you think Chase Hooper is going to be able to get this down to the ground and implement his grappling, he's probably going to submit Borshchev. If you think Borshchev can fend off Hooper's takedowns, which I believe he will, because Hooper, despite his grappling chops, he's not really good at getting the fight down there. So I think Borshchev, that's all he has to work on in the gym. That's all he has to work on. The guy's kickboxing is immaculate. I don't think he has to worry about that portion at all. So as long as he goes in there and works on that, I don't think Hooper's going to be able to take him down. If it does get there, Hooper's obviously live for getting a submission. He's live to get a submission against anybody in the lightweight division, in my opinion. Maybe not against Islam, but Islam, we'll see where it goes. Anyway, I think Borshchev, fights off those takedowns. I think he's going to be miles and miles ahead of Hooper on the feet, and he probably knocks out Chase Hooper in this matchup. I'm going Slava Claus, Vyacheslav Borshchev for the KO. Now, there's nothing technical needed to talk about in this fight. We got Waldo Cortes-Acosta going up against Robelis Despaigne. Now, I actually don't even know if I have a pick here. Robelis Despaigne, if you guys do not know, you definitely know who this is. This guy is an absolute powerhouse. He has 5 MMA fights. His first fight didn't go out of that first round. It was 4 minutes, 54 seconds. He was able to knock out his opponent. But since then, this guy has been in the octagon for like 37 seconds total over his last 4 fights. His second pro fight, 12-second knockout. Third pro fight, 3-second knockout. I don't even know how you knock someone out in 3 seconds. Like, by the time you guys touch gloves, it's been 3 seconds. Anyway, next fight after that, 4-second knockout. And then in his most recent fight, UFC debut, Josh Parisian, 18-second knockout. That knockout against Parisian was wild because Despaigne throws a kick, slips, and as he's getting up and backing up away from a Josh Parisian that's just throwing a flurry of punches like an absolute twat. Like, how are you gonna anyway? And as Robelis is backing up, he's just landing these heavy punches and knocks out Parisian while he's running backwards. Like, how strong is this guy if he's able to knock you out when he's not planting his feet? He's just the weight of his arms is knocking him out. Absolutely wild. Now you go to the Waldo Cortes-Acosta side. I've been a big fan of Acosta since I watched him on the Contender Series. I'm not going to lie. He goes in against Danilo Suzart, gets a first-round knockout. Great. He goes up against Jared Vandeira in his UFC debut. Not a good look whatsoever. He did win unanimously, but Jared Vandeira was chewing up Cortes-Acosta's leg. Waldo just refused to check leg kicks, and I don't understand how you can eat so many leg kicks and keep walking. That's insane. Not a good look against Vandeira. Chase Sherman, unanimous decision win. Chase Sherman has good boxing. If you don't come in with a wrestling game plan, you're not going to dominate against Chase Sherman, but he ended up getting a unanimous decision win. Going up against Marcos Rogerio de Lima. Tough vet to go up against that's going to come in heavy, wrestle, grapple, and that's basically what happened in that fight. He ends up losing a unanimous decision. Lucas Bresky. Decent win considering Bresky just beat Walter Walker, who was supposed to be some absolute beast of a man. Anyway, knocks him out in 3 minutes. Great win for him. But more recently, he struggled against a 44-year-old Andrei Arlovsky. Still won by unanimous decision, but questionable, I guess. Not a really good look for him. I don't know what was wrong there. So my problem is Despaigne the real deal? Do we know yet? He's been in the octagon for 30 seconds, or in the cage for 30 seconds in his last 4 fights. What is going to make of him if Waldo does survive the striking? What is he going to, I don't know. I've been sitting on this for a long time. A lot of people seem to be on the Despaigne side because, is it just hype or is he the real deal? Is this guy going to just come in and absolutely steamroll Acosta and knock him out in the first minute? Could happen. In MMA, Acosta seems like a very durable guy, but he is a former pro boxer that's been knocked out, I believe, 3 times in his boxing career. So is his chin, is he just not getting tested in the UFC? Is his durability somehow come back to him? I don't know. I'm not going to fall for the Robelis Despaigne hype. This guy is like a minus 200 something favorite. I guess, how could you not pick Despaigne in this matchup when he's been literally just destroying his opponents? Like I said, he's averaging less than 10 seconds a fight over his last 4 fights. But I don't think I'm going to hop on the Despaigne train just yet. I might seem insane, but I think Waldo is going to be a little trickier than his previous matchups. I don't even think Josh Parisian is UFC level. His IQ clearly isn't there because he knows Despaigne is this crazy knockout guy, and he comes in just head down, throwing punches and gets clipped. Waldo's not going to do that. Waldo's going to be a little more methodical. Waldo has power in his hands too. We don't know. This could be a complete fraud check on the Despaigne side. I'm not convinced yet. I want to see Despaigne go through a little bit of adversity first. If he puts Waldo away immediately like he has been, then I'll be like, okay, this guy probably is the real deal. I'll go on the Despaigne side then. But for right now, I want to see him go through a little bit of adversity first before I go all in on Robelis Despaigne. I'll take Waldo Cortes-Acosta in this fight. I might sound insane for doing that, but regardless, let's move on. I've overstayed my welcome for this particular breakdown. Next up, we have Alex Caceres going up against Sean Woodson. I don't know if you guys see it, but this guy is built exactly like Mike Wazowski. Anyway, no disrespect there. The guy is freakishly long. He's got long limbs, and good for him because it pays dividends for him in his fights. Now, I am going to be picking Sean Woodson in this fight to beat Alex Caceres. Alex Caceres is one of those vets that are on and off. I actually had Julian Erosa to beat him in their matchup. But he landed a awesome head kick that put Erosa out, but Erosa is known for his chinniness, not being able to take a hit. The Daniel Pineda fight, great, gritty fight against another vet. And then Giga Chikadze, I had Chikadze in that fight, but the reason you just can't trust somebody like Caceres is because he does have that veteran savvy, but like you're going up against Chikadze, who is known for his kickboxing. He's one of the better kickboxers in the UFC, and you just decide to go tit for tat against a better kickboxer. Why don't you mix in that wrestling? Why don't you mix in some clinch work? You're probably going to find success against somebody like Giga, but he just didn't do that. He stayed on the feet. So is that like a lack of IQ thing? Is that like an ego thing? Because like, oh, everybody thinks Chikadze or this person's good at this, I'm going to beat him at that, and then doesn't. I don't know. We go on the Sean Woodson side, and he's coming off of a solid win against Charles Jourdain. I had Charles Jourdain to win that fight. Call me biased. That probably played a big factor in my selection. But I'm a big Charles Jourdain fan, but Jourdain had nothing for him. That being a split decision is one of the most wild things. I'm glad Sean Woodson won, even though I had Jourdain, because that would have been one of the biggest robberies I've ever seen. Jourdain had no answer for Sean Woodson at all. He defended the takedowns well, and his length is he's just so twitchy. The way he moves his hands, you never know what he's going to do. He uses his length well. He does good on the feet, and he's so long, it's hard to take him down. He beats Dennis Mazuka, unanimous decision, which ended up being a solid win for him, because Bazooka, he did get knocked out by Jamal Emmers, but destroyed Connor Matthews in that fight. The only thing that trips me out is that Luis Saldana fight. That ended up being a split draw because Luis Saldana made such a critical error. Sean Woodson was everything that Luis was landing in that fight was hurting Sean Woodson, and then as Sean Woodson's on his butt, Saldana comes in and just knees him in the face. I don't know how that's not a DQ victory for Sean Woodson. Regardless, they took a point. It was a draw, split decision draw. Good for him. In this particular matchup, I think they're going to be pretty even on the feet. This is actually going to be a closer fight than I'd like in terms of a pick, but I think Sean Woodson is tricky on the feet for a lot of people. I don't think Caceres is going to mix in that wrestling, and even if he does, I think Sean Woodson's going to be able to fend them off with his length. I think he's going to find success on the feet and in what should be mostly a striking affair. Alex Caceres is a veteran savvy fighter that's going to give him a good fight, but I think Mike Wazowski gets the dub. Let's move on. And I think this is the start of our main card, if I'm not mistaken. No, Mike Wazowski was the main card, so make sure to hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel and drop some comments down below. I want to hear your guys' perspective on these fights, so make sure to hit that comment and type me out something. Let me hear your guys' perspective. Now, next up, we got Diego Ferreira going up against Mateusz Rebecki. Now, for the majority of these fights, there's 4 left. There's not going to be much of a technical analysis. We got Diego Ferreira, 39 years old, another veteran of the game, going up against an absolute powerhouse of Rebecki. The only thing Ferreira has in this fight is a Hail Mary submission. Rebecki's an absolute tank. He's going to be better everywhere. Maybe not in the grappling, but if Rebecki wants to take this fight to the ground, he's going to be able to. He's going to find more success on the feet. Now, Diego Ferreira is coming off of that knockout against Michael Johnson, but Michael Johnson is on the chinnier side. Ferreira was losing that fight until that one overhand just stiffened up Michael Johnson, but I don't see that happening to Mateusz Rebecki. Rebecki's an absolute powerhouse, like I've said multiple times. I think he's going to hit harder. He's going to be a little bit faster because of his youth. If he wants to outmuscle Ferreira to the ground, I think he's going to be able to finish Ferreira beyond a Hail Mary submission, like an Anthony Smith-esque against Petrino. I can't believe that. Still not over it. But beyond that, I don't think Ferreira wins. Not going to spend too much time on this. Rebecki is a very high confident pick for me in this particular matchup. Let's move on. Next up, we got a light heavyweight fight. Alonzo Menifield going up against Carlos Ulberg. And my pick here is going to be Carlos Ulberg. I love his technical striking. I like his power. He's another city kickboxing guy. Going up against Alonzo Menifield, this guy's a physically imposing guy, and if he's going to grab a hold of you, he's most likely going to find success there, muscling you to the cage, putting in some good work, grinding up on the fence, and wrestling you. And he has like, I don't want to say one hit and quit power, but he does have power behind his shots. Like, look at the guy. The guy's a tank. Look at him. Anyway, if he lands on Carlos Ulberg, he may be able to put him away. I don't really see that happening. This guy fought Jimmy Crute for 5 rounds, okay? 3-rounded decision, majority draw, okay? And it took him the 5th round of their over 2 fights to choke out Jimmy Crute. Now he goes up against Dustin Jacoby in his last fight, and Dustin Jacoby was winning that fight, and beyond like a couple of heavy punches that landed on Jacoby, that's what won Menifield the fight. But I think Carlos Ulberg is going to be too elusive. I think his movement's going to be too much. His technical striking is going to be too much. I think he pieces up Menifield, maybe eventually finds a finish against Menifield. One thing I haven't heard from a lot of people is Menifield is 36 years old now. So how much longer is his chin going to hold up? He's only been knocked out once, and that was against Ovince St. Preux back in 2020, so 4 years. So and then looking through he has a loss. His most recent loss is William Knight back in 2021, almost 2022. That is a terrible look. Terrible. Then he goes up, since then, beats Askar Majarov 17-13 at the time. Misha Serkinov, I don't even think fights anymore. He fought Jimmy Crute back-to-back, draw against Jimmy Crute because he got a point taken away, I believe, because of a fence grab. Beats Jimmy Crute the next time out. Jimmy Crute since has retired, and then beat Jacoby because of like 2 punches that swayed the decision in his favor in 2 separate rounds, I believe. Like I said, I think Carlos Ulberg is just going to be the more technical fighter. He's going to be elusive. He'll stay safe. I think he probably cruises to a unanimous decision victory. If not, finds that shot that puts him away. I think this, despite this being, I believe, in Alonzo Menifield's backyard in St. Louis, I think this is set up to kind of build up another city kickboxing guy in Carlos Ulberg. Give me Ulberg in this matchup. It's going to be a little scary if Menifield starts finding his shots because he's such a heavy-handed guy, but I think Carlos has this in the bag. Now we go to our co-main event. Joaquin Buckley going against Borat's neighbor, Nursultan Ruziboev. I only say it's his neighbor because if you guys have watched Borat, you'll know that Nursultan Tuliakbay is Borat's neighbor. Nursultan shares a name with him. This is Borat's neighbor. I don't care what anybody has to say to me. All right, Joaquin Buckley, since moving down to welterweight, has really found his weight class. He's strung together 3 wins in a row. First one was a finish over Andre Fiallo, which doesn't really hold much water now because we know Fiallo has 0 chin. Dominates Alex Morono over 3 rounds. He just destroyed Vicente Luque in 2 rounds, which is the best win of his career. Now, people do argue, Luque's not the same since his brain hemorrhage, which I don't doubt him, and that's why I actually believe that. I agree with that statement, but that's why I picked Buckley in that fight. A lot of people are like, no, Luque's going to win, da-da-da. Buckley was the obvious choice there. I know hindsight is 20/20, but both of these fighters fought on the same card 6 weeks ago. What card was that? Let me see. UFC Fight Night, Blanchfield versus Fioro. Ruziboev fought Cedric Dumas in that fight. Cedric Dumas in that fight, I believe, or on that card. Nursultan poked him in the eye, finished him. Good for him. Buckley finishes Luque. Great. 6 weeks later, these 2 fighters are fighting again. Now, one thing to note is that Ruziboev is going down to welterweight. He's a middleweight fighter now, but he has fought in the welterweight division throughout his career. But something else to note, out of 8 of his career losses, Ruziboev has lost 7 of those losses 7 times in the welterweight division. Since Buckley has moved down to welterweight, because he was quite a small middleweight, he has found success. He strung those 3 fights in a row. He went on the mic in the UFC 300 press conference and told Dana, dude, Derek Lewis does not want to fight 5 rounds. He's made this obvious. He said, Derek Lewis multiple times has said, I'm not fighting 5 rounds anymore. So Buckley's like, dude, make me the main event in my hometown of St. Louis. Buckley's been pleading for a St. Louis Fight Night card for a long time, and he got his wish at not the main event, but he is the co-main event spot. It's a very tough fight for him against Ruziboev, but I think Buckley is going to put his best foot forward here. He's going to try his best, and I love going with people that are going to do that. Buckley's got that like Mike Tyson-esque style of boxing. I'm not going to pretend to do it because I can't do it, but the way he fights is it's like that Customato like shuffle. You just watch them fight. The way they box is he has that very Mike Tyson-esque style, and you go up against Ruziboev, who has an extreme amount of experience. He's 34, 8-2. He's got 44 fights under his belt, but a big thing is that weight, that cutting the weight down to 170. I don't think it's going to play well for him, especially because this is on short notice, and it's not like it's a 15-pound difference. It's not like 10 pounds. I could be like, okay, maybe he can pull this off. If he had a full camp, yeah, maybe he pulls this off. But I just like this for Buckley. Ruziboev is going to be the longer fighter. He has all the capabilities in the world. On the feet, I think this is more evenly a match than people may think. If the fight does go to the ground, I do favor Ruziboev. And one thing that MMA Guru actually mentioned was that body kick that Buckley likes to do so much is exactly how Ruziboev knocked out Bruno Ferreira in his debut. Ferreira threw that body kick. Nursultan grabs it, blasts him with a straight right, and puts him on his ass and knocks him out. If Buckley decides to do that, Ruziboev will catch that kick and will hurt Buckley. But Buckley's a pretty smart dude when he's in the cage. Despite his blitzes forward, and I think he's gonna avoid those body kicks, especially against a tall fighter like Ruziboev. Maybe he goes for more leg kicks, kind of take that pop out of Nursultan's shots. But I don't know if this is a bias thing. I actually like Ruziboev as a fighter. I think he's gonna go far in the UFC, but I am gonna go with Buckley here. I think the hometown's gonna be on his side. I think he's gonna close that distance. I don't know how Ruziboev is gonna look on the scales, and I did say I'm gonna make post weigh-in picks as well, so we'll see if I change my mind here, but I will go with Buckley. A lot of people are very confident on the Ruziboev side, but there's a lot of unknowns in terms of him moving down to welterweight, short notice. Buckley's at home. He has a little bit of extra confidence with his hometown people there, and especially stringing 3 fights together in a row in that welterweight division. So give me Buckley in this matchup. We go on to the main event. Derek Lewis going up against Rodrigo Nascimento, and there is nothing I really need to say about this fight. We got Derek Lewis, the knockout king. Most knockouts in UFC history, going up against Rodrigo Nascimento, who I do not hold in high regard that much. Yes, he's 11-1, but he's not that good, man. He's not that good. Unanimous decision against Dontel Mays. Okay. Alir Latifi, split decision. Okay. Tanner Bozer, split decision. Okay. That's craziness. Before that, no contest against Alan Boudreaux. I am not sure what that's about. Regardless, it's Alan Boudreaux. Chris Dawkins knocked him out in 45 seconds. That is disgusting. That's awful. Rear naked choke against Dontel Mays. Okay. All right. That's his whole UFC career. All right. And you go to Derek Lewis. I don't even have to talk about Derek Lewis. You already know who this guy is. This guy is going to eat chicken. He's going to eat pizza. It doesn't matter. He's going to eat anything right before the fight. I've seen posts about him eating a whole rack of ribs and all this food right before he's about to walk out into the octagon. The guy he's hilarious. He's a savage. The one punch on Nascimento is going to put him away, and I stand by that. I think that's going to happen. People are like, oh, Nascimento's got that grappling. He's going to be able to wrestle Lewis and get him down to the ground, submit him. Dude, okay. Derek Lewis is not having the most success. He's 1-4 in his last 5, but let's look into that a little bit more, okay? Not just the 5 fights. Let's go. He absolutely wrecks Curtis Blades. Huge uppercut. That was one of the most vicious knockouts. Great win. Loses to Ciryl Gane. Come on, man. Ciryl Gane absolutely destroys Nascimento. Let's be real. Knocks out Chris Dawkins, who knocked out Nascimento. I'm not using MMA math regardless. Tuivasa knocks out Derek Lewis. But Tui at the time was surging. He gets knocked out by Pavlovich after that. It's Pavlovich, man. It's Pavlovich. And then he gets wrestled and arm triangled by Spivak. Nascimento is not even close to Spivak's level on the ground. Comes in, flying knee against Rogerio de Lima. 33 seconds, puts the guy on his ass, knocks him out. That was awesome. And then in his most recent fight, goes up against, I think, short notice against Gelton Almeida in a fight night main event. And he loses a unanimous decision over 25 minutes. So you're telling me that he survived on the mat and was able to get up against Gelson Almeida and doesn't get submitted, doesn't get put away. But some people are thinking that Nascimento is going to do that to Derek Lewis. Give me a break. Derek Lewis by KO, probably early. I don't want to say first round, but you know what? I'll say first round. I think Derek Lewis puts it on Nascimento. I don't think he worries about the takedowns. I don't think he worries about the clinching. I think he's in St. Louis. Everybody's going to love Derek Lewis here. I think he feeds off the crowd. I think he just puts it on Nascimento and just bodies him, puts him away. Thank you guys so much for watching another breakdown video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. I appreciate all your support. Now, I actually will go over all of my picks again, just in case I didn't say it in some of the breakdowns. So we're gonna go with Veronica Hardy kicking off the card. We're gonna go Kevin Jousset, Charles Johnson, first underdog, I believe. Billy Goff, second underdog. Then we got Tabitha Ricci. We got Esteban Ribovics, Vyacheslav Borshchev, Waldo Cortes-Acosta. I am not confident in that pick whatsoever, but that's another underdog. Mike Wazowski, a.k.a. Sean Woodson, Mateusz Rebecki, Carlos Ulberg, Joaquin Buckley, and then Derek Lewis. That's going to be all my picks. Like I said, we were trying something new this time, guys. We didn't really watch too much tape on a lot of these fights. Gonna go more of an instinctual thing and like prior knowledge, and let's see how we do. If we end up doing well, this is how I'm gonna do my breakdowns from now on. But I hope you guys liked the video. I will see you in the next one.